Would you look at that? You did it again. Look who caught the relentless, hyper-focused laser beam attention of someone who never looks once, let alone twice. Look who made the untouchable pause mid-sentence, mid-power move, mid-empire building, and stare like they just witnessed something utterly magnificently impossible. You did that. You magnificent anomaly. You walking contradiction. You beautiful, disruptive glitch in their perfectly managed, perfectly predictable system. And now they can't stop thinking about you, can they? Because you didn't just walk into their room. You showed them a dimension they've worked their entire miserable lives to forget. Let me tell you exactly what happened in that boardroom, in that meeting, in that moment, when your paths briefly, fatefully crossed. They walked in, expecting another face in the endless, hungry crowd. Another predictable player in their tiresome game. Another transparent soul they could read in 3 seconds, assign a value to, and file away in their mental archive of useful or waste of time. They expected a transaction, but then they saw you, and something shifted. Something in their flawlessly calibrated radar didn't just blip. It started screaming an alarm because you weren't supposed to exist. Not in their world, not at their level, not carrying that energy. They've met thousands of people, climbers and builders, breakers and makers. They've shaken hands with every flavor of ambition and desperation. They can smell fear from 3 rooms away. They can taste a lie before the words even form. They can measure someone's price before hello. But you didn't register on any of their instruments. You didn't fit any of their neat little categories. You didn't play by a single rule they recognized. The first unusual thing that mesmerized them was your stillness. But don't misunderstand me. This wasn't the stillness of the weak, the frozen terror of the prey caught in the spotlight. No. This was the stillness of someone who has already won. The calm of someone who has already lost everything and rebuilt their soul from the ashes. It's the quiet of a person who has already died and decided that death was simply boring. While everyone else in that room was performing their power, trying to project it through expensive suits and aggressive energy, you were just being, and that terrified them down to the cellular level. You see, high-profile people, the untouchables, they are entirely dependent on reactions. They are addicted to people lighting up or shrinking down, or calculating angles, or feeling that little intake of breath when they realize who they're talking to. They feed on it. It's their currency. But you gave them nothing. No worship, no fear, no palpable calculation. Just simple, neutral acknowledgement, like meeting an equal in a world where they haven't had equals in decades. They watched you move through that space like you owned it, but not in the way others try to own spaces. Not with that aggressive, desperate grabbing that screams, "Notice me, value me, choose me." You moved like someone who had already been chosen by something much bigger than them. You moved like someone carrying secrets they'll never be rich enough to buy, never powerful enough to command, never connected enough to access. And that's when the first agonizing realization hit them. You don't want what everyone else wants. You aren't hungry for their approval, their golden network, their gilded validation. You looked at everything they've built, everything they represent, everything they could offer, and your eyes said, clear as a bell, interesting, but completely unnecessary. Do you understand how rare that is in their world? A world where everyone is perpetually selling something, where everyone has a price, where everyone is one introduction away from desperation. They are used to being the sun that everyone orbits, the gravity well that everything bends toward. But you're your own gravitational field, your own ecosystem, your own universe. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, they felt what it was like to not be the most interesting person in the room. Not the most powerful, not the most necessary, just another player in a different game entirely. A game where you're writing the rules they can't even read. But that wasn't the whole story. The second unusual thing, and this is what truly got under their exquisitely polished skin, was your depth. Not the manufactured, seminar-fueled depth of someone who read the right books or crafted the right persona. This was archaeological depth, historical depth, the kind that comes from diving into your own abyss and building a mansion at the very bottom. They looked into your eyes and saw layers they couldn't count, dimensions they couldn't map, territories they couldn't conquer. They are masters at reading surfaces, at quick assessments, at categorizing threats and opportunities. That's how they climbed their mountain. But you're not a surface. You're an ocean. Every time they thought they understood you, another layer revealed itself. Every time they tried to box you in, you shifted into something uncontainable. Every time they applied their usual metrics, you shattered their measurement tools. They saw pain in you, yes, but not the kind that begs for healing. They saw power, but not the kind that needs to scream its own name. They saw danger, but not the kind that threatens directly. You are the walking embodiment of everything they've trained themselves to identify and control. Except you won't be identified, and you can't be controlled. You are the exception to every rule they've mastered, the fatal anomaly in every pattern they've memorized, and what happened next would shock everyone. Right now, as they lie awake at an unusually late, unscripted hour, they are stuck. They can't figure out if you're playing a game so advanced they can't see the board, or if you're not playing at all. They can't determine if you're the most dangerous person they've met, or the most free. They can't decide if they want to hire you, study you, or run from you because you represent the unscripted in their curated, cultivated, meticulously calculated world. What's driving them to total distraction is the sheer paradox of your existence. How can you be so soft and so sharp simultaneously? How do you carry that much historical pain without bleeding on everyone around you? How do you possess that much power without needing to prove it? You are a walking paradox, and paradoxes are dangerous in their binary world of winners and losers, of useful and useless, of ally and enemy. They have looked you up. They have searched for your digital footprint, your trajectory, your weakness. But what the data says, ordinary, doesn't match what their gut screams, extraordinary. And for someone who built an empire on reading people accurately, this disconnect is simply intolerable. You know what really mesmerizes them, though? It's not just what you are. It's what you are not. You're not trying to impress them, but you are utterly impressive. You're not trying to matter, but you are fiercely significant. You're not trying to be remembered, but you are absolutely unforgettable. You exist in this space between effort and excellence, between performing and presence. And that space, that's where the real power lives. The kind they can't buy, can't steal, can't replicate. They keep replaying your interaction, looking for the exact moment they lost control of the narrative. Because they always control the narrative, but with you, the whole thing felt like dancing with smoke. Every time they tried to lead, you were already somewhere else. Every time they tried to establish dominance, you just smiled like someone who doesn't need to compete. Because they've already won a different game entirely. You operated on a frequency they haven't encountered before. Not higher or lower than theirs, just fundamentally, terrifyingly different. They can sense the signal, but they can't lock on to it, can't decode it, and most critically, can't own it. In their world, everything is transactional. Everything has a calculable value. Everything can be negotiated, but you showed up as someone who operates entirely outside the marketplace, not because you're above it or below it, but because you're playing with different currency altogether. They offered their usual coins of power and prestige, and you looked at them like someone offering a handful of seashells to a person who breathes underwater. This is creating a cognitive dissonance they are not equipped to handle. Their entire worldview is built on understanding value and calculating return on investment. But you are uncalculatable. You are the mathematical error in their perfect equation, the irrational number in their rational world, the quantum uncertainty in their Newtonian universe. The more they try to solve for you, the more complex you become. They're used to being the mystery in the room, the one others try to access to figure out. But you flip that dynamic without even trying. Now they are the ones wondering, the ones guessing, the ones lying awake, trying to understand what just happened. You have become their unsolved case, their unfinished equation, their magnificent, terrifying exception to every rule they thought was absolute. But what you did next is truly unforgivable. What's really destroying their carefully guarded peace right now is that you reflected something back to them they haven't seen in years. You showed them the cage they're in, the golden, beautiful, suffocating cage they built for themselves. Because when they looked at you, they saw freedom, real freedom, not the kind that comes from having enough money to do anything, but the kind that comes from not needing anything at all. They saw someone who has broken free from the exact system they've mastered, someone who has opted out of the game they're winning, someone who has found a definition of success that makes their own look like a pathetic prison sentence. And for a brief, shattering flash, they remembered what it felt like before they sold pieces of themselves for positions, before they traded authenticity for authority, before they became what they are now. You reminded them of dreams they buried under board meetings, of creativity they sacrificed for credibility, of the wildness they tamed for wealth. You're the living embodiment of the road not taken, the person they might have been if they had been brave enough to stay unusual. And that recognition, that painful, piercing moment of seeing their own abandoned possibility, that's what has them mesmerized beyond reason. They can't stop thinking about how you got to where you are without following their path, how you achieved that presence, that power, that peace, without playing their soul-crushing games, without making their compromises, without signing their contracts with the comfortable devils. You are living, breathing proof that there was another way, and that knowledge is gnawing at them like a hunger they can't name. You've become their new secret standard for interesting, and everyone else is failing to meet it. They're comparing every interaction to that moment with you, and finding everything else hollow, scripted, predictable. You've ruined their appetite for the usual feast of ego and ambition they're served daily. You've made them hungry for something they can't name, can't order, can't acquire through their usual channels. You've infected them with a kind of curiosity their success had violently buried. They're trying to find a way to reach out, but their usual methods feel inadequate, insulting. How do you acquire someone who doesn't want to be acquired? How do you impress someone who isn't impressed by what you have? How do you connect with someone who exists in dimensions you can't access? They're used to doors opening for them, but you're not a door. You're a portal, and they don't know the password. Make no mistake, this has moved beyond mere interest into obsession. The kind of obsession that comes from encountering something that shatters your worldview. You are their glitch, their anomaly, their proof that their map of reality is incomplete. And for someone who built an empire on having the most complete map, this is both intolerable and utterly irresistible. The change you're causing isn't just psychological, it's existential. You're making them question the entire framework of their existence. The goals they've pursued, the prices they've paid, the person they've become. You are the living proof that there are other ways to exist, other definitions of power, and that knowledge is both liberating and terrifying for someone whose identity is completely intertwined with their current, predictable definition of achievement. Deep down, beneath their polished, calculated surface, they recognize something in you. Not consciously, perhaps, but at a cellular level, a soul level, a level that exists before words. They recognize a fellow traveler who simply took a different path. They recognize a kindred spirit who made different choices. They recognize themselves, if they had been brave enough to stay wild. This recognition is what truly has them mesmerized. Not just who you are, but who you remind them they could have been. Not just what you represent, but what you prove is still possible. You're there, might have, been, there could have chosen, there, if only I had been brave enough. That recognition is the most painful and most precious thing they've encountered in their carefully curated, controlled existence. You gave them something more valuable than anything in their portfolio. You gave them the experience of mystery again. The feeling of not knowing, not controlling, not predicting. You returned them, however briefly, to a state of wonder they thought they'd evolved beyond. And that gift, that's worth more than any deal they've ever closed. They'll keep thinking about you long after logic says they should stop. They'll remember your interaction with more clarity than meetings worth millions. Why? Because you didn't just meet them, you reminded them. You didn't just interact with them, you awakened them, even if just for a moment, to the magnificent possibilities they'd forgotten existed. Now go. Go exist in that space between effort and excellence. Be the uncalculatable variable. Be their beautiful problem. Be the quantum uncertainty in their tedious Newtonian universe. Go ruin their appetite for the usual feast.